We are live.
Excellent. Welcome. My name is Richard Snow. I am the Black Franchise Leadership Council Chair, Vice President, SBA National Franchise Relationship Manager at Busby Bank. I welcome you to the Black Franchise Leadership Council Juneteenth celebration. Our topic for today is economic equality through franchising. Before we start our discussion, I want to provide a framework on why we're celebrating this amazing day, and that is now a holiday. So on this day, June 19th, African Americans were enslaved, but did not know that they were free. They did not know that they were free. And the Union General arrived at Galveston, Texas to inform the enslaved African Americans of their freedom and that the Civil War had ended. The Emancipation Proclamation had already been issued more than 2.5 years earlier on January 1st, 1863 by President Abraham Lincoln. This holiday has received its name by combining June and 19. Sometimes you hear it called Juneteenth, Independence Day, Freedom Day, Emancipation Day. Today, we will be speaking about economic freedom that we believe can be achieved through franchising. In simple terms, economic equality is about leveling the playing field where everyone has the same access to the same wealth creation. It doesn't matter if you're a Black entrepreneur living in the inner city or a professional athlete. You should all have the same aspirations and the same opportunities to create generational wealth. So prepare to be enriched by an amazing group of passionate entrepreneur advocates. That's what we are, because this takes a lot of time, blood, sweat, tears that we put out day in and day out to bring this information. So without further ado, I'm welcoming for opening remarks Charlie Chase. He's the IFA First Vice Chair, President, and CEO of First Service Brands Incorporated.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, everybody. As First Service Brands, we're a company that is mostly in property services. Our brands include things like CertaPro Painters and Paul Davis Restoration and California Closets. In that capacity, I'm the CEO, and we have 1,500 franchises, and we are not nearly as diverse as we need to be. And this celebration highlights and puts a very fine point on the gap that we have in our own business. I also represent the International Franchise Association. I will be the incoming chair for 2022. And at the IFA, we believe that franchising plays a very important role in accelerating prosperity. To be quite blunt, franchising is an on-ramp for entrepreneurs that provide guardrails for prosperity, for creating intergenerational wealth. And it also creates an on-ramp for employees through workforce training to ascend through the franchise and ultimately own the franchise, of which our organization is very proud to have a big history, long history of that. We also believe that diversity in all forms creates opportunities for everybody. And personally, I think that the biggest issue is engineering, creating opportunities for inclusion that allow people to feel comfortable in the spaces where they're working so they can accelerate personally in their profession. In February of this year, in honor of Black History Month, the IFA Foundation launched the Black Franchise Leadership Council. And it's part of our Diversity Institute. And at this point, we are honored to acknowledge Juneteenth and discuss how we can continue to strive for economic equality for all. We know that minorities, women, and underrepresented communities make up 30% of the ownership of franchises in the United States. But we also know that only 8% of those owners come from the Black and African American community. That is essentially the representation I have in my own franchise systems. And that's why it's so important to create opportunities, because it works. What this data tells us is that franchising is a powerful tool to create intergenerational wealth and an opportunity for people to put their hands around a business opportunity that they can scale within their community. It gives them the opportunity to create jobs in underrepresented communities, and it also creates opportunities for them to scale beyond their own borders. As I turn over the floor, I'd like to say thank you to Ron Busby, President and CEO of the U.S. Black Chambers, as well as Malcolm Jenkins, who of course we all know is a 2-time Super Bowl champ, used to play for our Philadelphia Eagles, and he's the CEO of Malcolm Inc. Thank you for joining us in this effort today.
Thank you, Charlie. Next, we'll have opening remarks from Tony Valley, IFA Foundation Chair, CEO of College Pro, and operating partner of CSG.
Thanks, Richard. First of all, thank you for the invite. Very, very humbled to be a participant. In the United States and in Canada, Juneteenth is a reminder of our continued need to uplift Black leaders, promote economic equity, and be really supportive of people from all backgrounds. I know that we have 7 emerging brands in Clear Summit Group, all very diversity is one of our most important attributes, and just like Charlie, I think we're doing okay, but we can do a lot better. And I think it's also an essential part of 2021 leadership to be inclusive. And in my career, I've worked very, very hard on the idea that if you work hard enough and you have the smarts, you can realize your potential, you have a chance to move ahead, but that's not a true statement for everyone. I think that's a lot of what this is about. It's up to leaders like me to use any influence I have, any power I have to the benefit of making sure more people are at the table. As chairman of the IFA Foundation and the home of the Diversity Institute, we want to make franchising one of the most diverse sectors in the economy. We want it to be a beacon, and conversations like we're going to have today with the Black Franchise Leadership Council can help us move towards that. Franchising, I wanted to actually join Charlie in thanking all of our esteemed speakers, volunteer leaders, Diversity Institute, IFA Foundation. It's very, very humbling. It's very humbling to be here. So thank you for the opportunity. I want to listen, understand, and work shoulder to shoulder with you in the journey.
Thank you, Tony. Next, we'll have Carolyn Thurston. She's an IFA board member. She's also my vice chair of the Black Franchise Leadership Council. I don't know how I would do this without her. She's also founder and CEO of Wisdom Senior Care.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, all of our speakers, all our volunteers. I think it's so exciting to be part of an organization that really takes this issue, even prior to this time that we're in, and was already putting steps in place so we can start to build a platform where we could feel comfortable to come and make people aware. And I'm just really excited because awareness is so key. So I'm excited to hear our speakers and everyone that's listening. Just tell other people, make them aware of these conversations and what's happening. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next, we'll have John J.D. Draper, IFA Diversity Institute Board First Vice Chair, IFA Foundation Board Member, and CEO of Viridian Group, LLC.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks to all of the panelists, all of the hard-working people behind the scenes that have put this event together. And thank you also to the speakers you're going to have a wonderful time listening to. I'm elated just waiting for it to begin. The thing that sparks my attention to this group today is something that Vincent van Gogh said once to his brother. He said, "Great things are not done by impulse, but by a series of small things brought together." And that's what this group has done. I recall a conversation with a person by the name of Ricky, who, along with Ms. Jackson, who is our president of the Diversity Institute Board, they got together and they said, "We got an idea. We need to bring together more focus on Black operations." They put together a program, and Richard Snow, being the chairman of that institute, Black Leadership Franchise Council, has put not just this organization, this meeting together, but has put many others together and plan to put even more. He's putting the importance of Black franchising in the forefront. So all of you are, in fact, gifted by being a part of this wonderful organization and by bringing these little things together to make a part of something even greater. So welcome, welcome, and welcome.
Thank you, JD. Next, we'll turn it over to Ursa R. Jackson, Esquire, IFA board member, Diversity Institute chair, and attorney at law at Clark Hill. She will now begin to introduce our speaker, Ron Busby, CEO and president of the U.S. Black Chamber. Ursa, the floor is yours. Ursa?
She'll be right back on.
Okay.
Thank you, Richard. Ursa Jack introduced Ron Busby to you. He is also a successness owner. He's been recognized as one of the nation's best CEOs. He started his first company, a janitorial firm, and grew it from 150,000 in revenue to 15 million in revenue in a 10-year span. So he knows something about building a successful business. He graduated with honors from Florida A&M University and Clark Atlanta University. He is a big proponent of education. He has continued his education even beyond undergraduate. He had attended the Tuck School of Business Administration at Dartmouth, minority business owners. He is currently on the board of some large companies and groups such as Newspaper Publishers Association, African American Leadership Council, companies such as ExxonMobil, Xerox, IBM, Coca-Cola USA. He is from Oakland, California.
Ursa's audio's going in and out. It's intermittent. If you can hear us.
He lives in DC and has 2 sons.
Okay.
Richard, I'm trying the connection again. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now. We definitely heard the last part of the introduction of Ron.
Great. Let me just summarize a couple of things. If you can hear me okay, Ron, I apologize. We're grateful to have you here. He's recognized as one of the nation's best CEOs. He is.
We can't hear you.
Is a former successful business owner, a big proponent of education. He currently serves on the White. I'm going to pass it to you.
Okay. So at this time, thank you, Ursa. At this time, we'll pass it on to Ron. We have some internet connection issues, as we know in this virtual meeting world. This happens, but we see through those and we move forward. So, Ron, we give the floor to you to speak to your agenda, to the U.S. Black Chamber, and why you're here to support us. So, without further ado, Ron Busby.
Well, thank you so much. Hopefully everyone is enjoying the day. Good morning to those of you that are on the West Coast, and good afternoon to those of us on the East Coast. Again, Ron Busby, I'm the president and CEO of the U.S. Black Chambers, and I appreciate the intro. What she didn't tell you is the reason I'm here is because I've had a little experience in the Franchise Association and in the franchise business myself. Part of my story is as she explained, I was in corporate America for about 10 years. My last job in corporate America was really with Coca-Cola fountain sales. And while I was there early on in my career, I remember getting to work early mornings, 7 a.m., and I wouldn't leave each evening until 7 p.m. wasn't because I was just trying to be a great employee. I was really trying to understand the industry, trying to gain my knowledge of the business as well as my customers. And just, it took a lot of effort from me. And then about 3 months into my career, my supervisor called me in and said, Ron, I want you to pack your bags. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting ready to get let go so early. And he said, no, I want you to take Joe's place. Understand at the time I was 27 years old, a young man looking at the future. Joe, who we spoke to, was a 56-year-old white gentleman who had been at Coca-Cola for nearly 30 years. He knew the business extremely well. He knew his customers, his client, as well as the industry. And so he could get to work each day at 9 and leave at 4 or 5 o'clock and do extremely well. That day, when they told me that I was going to take Joe's position, I said I needed to create my own exit strategy. I didn't want to work another 30 years only to have to be reporting to someone half my age. And so at at Coca-Cola, our largest customer was McDonald's. And I had the opportunity to meet several Black millionaires that many of them owned Black McDonald's franchisees. And so I would work at Coke from 7 to 7, go home, change my clothes, and go to McDonald's and work from 8 to midnight. And I went there to understand how to run a business, how to create operations and processes that could really take and drive a revenue generating business forward. The information that I learned while I was there, the skills, how to grow a business, I was able to take those processes and programs to my family business. And as was discussed, we had 5 employees, my mother, my father, my 2 sisters, and me. And between the years of 1989 to 1998, I was able to grow that family business from 5 employees to over 1,500, allowing us to be the largest Black janitorial service in the country. I had some setbacks, as was discussed. My wife died, and I was able to move to Phoenix, Arizona, where I got involved then with the Phoenix Black Chamber of Commerce. Understanding the importance of advocacy for Black-owned businesses, I was able to elevate our conversation as well as the voice of Black businesses across the country. Early on, I had the opportunity to meet then Senator Barack Obama, and we had conversations about how he was going to run for president and ultimately win. And he told me early on he would not forget me. Many elected officials say those types of words, and we know that many times they never follow through. But in this case, he did. And then in 2009, we created what is now known the U.S. Black Chamber. And early on, we decided who we were going to be in the future. And so the U.S. Black Chamber then had 6 Black chambers. Today, we have over 149, located in 42 states with a membership base of over 385,000 Black-owned businesses. And we're headquartered here in Washington, D.C. And the importance of that is because of the 5 pillars that we've created. And the first one being advocacy, because you see, as Black business owners, we know the importance of having a Black voice that represents the concerns that we have uniquely related to us. And for many of you listeners that are on, you know some of the challenges that we had with the restaurant revitalization program, or the payroll protection plan, or the idle loan plan. Many of those conversations were being advocated for and behind the U.S. Black Chamber's voice. Our second pillar is access to capital. And we know that Black-owned businesses pay twice the rate, we get half the funding, and we have several challenges that our communities face. And it has nothing to do with financial literacy. It really is about relationships and understanding who we are and where we should go. Our third one, and this is what I really want to talk about this afternoon, is contracting. And we look at that from 3 different vantage points. The first one is, where is the federal government spending its money? And you're going to hear a great deal, even this afternoon, about an infrastructure bill that is coming down to play. Anytime there's administration change, they're always talking about infrastructure. And we want to make sure that Black businesses are in the front of the line to make sure that we have the opportunity to compete. We're very excited that we heard from the president while he was in Tulsa, discuss the commitment that the federal government is spending 15% of its contracting dollars with Black firms. That's the first time this has ever been a commitment. But we also look at, where is the private sector spending its money? And last year, we heard that a lot of private sector firms, Fortune 100 firms, came out and made a commitment of $66 billion of spend and philanthropic relationships with Black-owned firms. To date, we've only seen 250 million of those dollars actually hit the pocketbooks and contracts of Black-owned businesses. But third and most importantly, you hear an awful lot about Black businesses and Black consumers. You see, the conversation is, well, Black people have $1 trillion of spend power. Usually that's not Black people having that conversation. That's usually white corporate America saying Black consumers have $1 trillion. How can we market to them to get our share of those dollars? What the U.S. Black Chamber is here to say, how can we keep that $1 trillion in our community to allow us to have sustainability and growth and prosperity? Our fourth one is around entrepreneurial training. And last year, we saw that we lost 41% of Black-owned businesses due to the virus. But the majority of them said that they closed their doors not because of financial literacy, like many conversations are being had, but it was due to lack of information, clarity on how to and where to go to get the resources that they needed. And so the U.S. Black Chamber is here to provide resources and information to make sure that our businesses have the acumen, the resources, and the relationships to continue to grow and prosper. And the last one is around chamber development. Again, when we began, we had 6 chambers. Today, we have nearly 150. And chamber development is more than just creating value to those chambers, but it's really about mentoring in our communities and making sure that we're giving back. So today, we're talking about Juneteenth. And as it's been discussed, I was born in Houston, Texas. So I was right down the street from Galveston. And you see, in my community, the Juneteenth had a different representation of what we are talking about today and what many white people have told us over the years. We've been told that on June 19, 1865, that was the day that the news reached Texas and the enslaved Blacks were now free. Well, that's part of the story, but that's their story. You see, from my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, it was ex-slaves that went to the North, that joined the Union, came down to Texas to fight the Confederacy. And on June 19th, they won. No one wants to talk about that, as Black people were able to free themselves in a fight against an oppressive South. You see, in the state of Texas, Texas was under the flags of both the France, Spain, Mexico, the Confederacy. They were ultimately independent, and then they came up under the arms of the United States. So whites never really wanted us to have the conversation about losing to Black troops and how proud Black people were when they saw Black troops coming into Galveston carrying rifles and wearing uniforms, letting white slave owners know that they had to retreat, that they had lost. But just like then and just like today, when those Union troops left, it was difficult for freed Blacks to survive. So many of them left the South and opened up cities like Greenwood and like Tulsa and 149 other Black towns and cities across the country. And we began to prosper. And that's where you now heard about the bombing of what we are now calling our Black Wall Street. We understood the value of a Black economic and economy then and how important those Black dollars were. If we fast forward 156, 155 years later, Black America is under attack again. Last year, we faced what we call a trifecta of impact, really a 3-legged stool. The first one was the virus itself, COVID-19. And Black people died at an alarming rate under the auspices or the title of being essential workers. We know that Black people were living in conditions that were too close. We really weren't getting the information, or as well, not being able to have a safe environment. The second one was the stimulus or the lack of that for Black people. We did not see a program hit our communities. A program called the Payroll Protection Plan was never created for Black-owned businesses. If you understand that the program was created to protect the employees versus the employer, and understand that of the 2.6 million Black-owned businesses that we own and operate across the country, 2.5 million had no employees. And so for us, it was a program that was created to once again keep us in the background. And I put a comma there because historically, Black people have talked about reparations. But in so many cases, we've said, no, the country does not have those kinds of dollars to even have that conversation. But yet we saw the United States write the largest stimulus check that this country has seen. It was announced on a Friday that we were going to spend $349 billion with small businesses that were impacted by COVID. But yet by Saturday afternoon, 250 billion of those dollars were awarded to 50 white publicly traded firms. And those firms were never asked the question, did you lose revenue? Did you have to lay off people? Were you impacted by the COVID itself? None of the accountability, none of the questions were being asked, but yet when we talk about reparations, it is always a conversation about the future. And then the third leg of that trifecta was the murder of George Floyd. And we saw Black people, white people, young and old, protest across the country to say, this is unnecessary. We've got to be able to have better policing, better ways of justifying what police do in our communities as well as around the country. And that's why it's so important for Black businesses to be recognized and acknowledged, because you see, Black people now are starting to see the impact of our dollars. Right now, the affirmative movement in Black communities is there. And Black franchisee owners, you're being left out of the conversation. You're now, many companies, corporate America, as well as Black consumers, are dedicated to supporting Black-owned businesses, and no one knows where the Black franchisee owners are. We had a conversation early on in our existence with NABHOOD, the National Association of Black Hotel Owners and Operators. And we said, hey, we want to promote your locations. And they said, well, we're concerned because we don't want to lose our white clients. And I was like, well, the name of your association is NABHOOD, the National Association of Black Hotel Owners and Operators. That's who you are. We want to make sure that we can support your brands, but more importantly, how do we support your businesses? And so we were successful with the National Black Automobile Dealers, the National Bankers Association, Black Realtors, NARAD, Black doctors, Black dentists have all seen the light, and Black people now are continuing to be able to support Black-owned businesses across the country. But you can't wait for corporate America to tell us how to demonstrate our Blackness. As we celebrate Juneteenth, which is our Independence Day, we can and should be unapologetic about who we are, how we support one another. Because I say this, we're not minorities. We're the only group in this country that is not being recognized. Last year, this time, during the NBA playoffs, we actually had a great relationship with one of our corporate partners, DoorDash. And they said, we're going to provide free delivery for Black-owned restaurants. But guess what? Those restaurants that were able to participate weren't Black restaurants, but they were minority-owned restaurants. They were Asian restaurants, Hispanic-owned restaurants, pizza parlors. Everyone except for Black-owned restaurants were able to take advantage of a program that was created for Black business owners. And so the U.S. Black Chamber is saying, we want to support your businesses as well as your brands. We know that right now, Black consumers are looking to support you, looking to find you. So the U.S. Black Chamber has created our own certification program, and you can find out more information on the slide that you'll see next. You can visit usblackchambers.org/certification. Again, www.usblackchambers.org/certification. This allows you to onboard your franchise, your locations across the country, so that when Black people are looking to spend their dollars with your brands, that we can find you, that we can support you, and we can keep those dollars in our communities. We know what you do for our communities. You hire us. You provide resources to our communities. You pay taxes in our communities. And many times you're the folk that are giving back, providing the scholarships, but we want to be able to tell your stories. We want to be able to support your businesses. And we want to make sure that not just today, but in the future, we have long-term sustainability. And I'll end with this story. There used to be this myth that many Black people heard across the years, and that was that white people's ice was colder than our ice. And many white people never heard that story, but in our communities, we did often. And you see, my grandfather used to deliver ice. Before we had refrigerators and ice makers, we actually had ice boxes. And you get a block of ice placed in your ice box, and it would last about 7 days, and would keep your meats and your milks and fruits and vegetables fresh for those 7 days. Well, when I was traveling with my grandfather, he would deliver his ice to his white clients first thing Saturday morning. But by the time he got to the Black communities, the homes and the ice boxes of the Black people, that ice had sat on the back of that truck most of the day. And so it had melted down a little bit and got chipped away a little bit. And so by the time it reached our ice boxes, it literally only lasted 5.5 days. But because of the ice maker and Black people's initiatives and Black people's creativity, we can get ice as cold as anyone's across the country. Matter of fact, we can get crushed ice, cubed ice, flavored ice, filtered ice, and even in some cases, colored ice. And when we see our businesses, our franchises, as well as our dollars and communities in that vein, we no longer have to worry about outside communities, what other communities are doing. We have the ability to move ourselves forward. And so as we celebrate and we acknowledge this Juneteenth, we want to make sure that we can continue to move our businesses, our communities, and families forward. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share these words with you, and we look forward to continuing to work with you guys as well.
Ron, I applaud you. That was absolutely amazing, taking us through that historical walk and coming from that town and understanding the narrative, what took place, and how do we empower from the past all the way up into the present and what it looks like going into the future. Thank you for laying that groundwork, and the words were empowering, inspiring, and I know some people are being fed here right now from the inspiration you provided. Up next, we have another powerhouse conversation, a fireside chat we're getting ready to have here. We have a 12-year NFL veteran, two-time Super Bowl champion, one from my Philadelphia Eagles, three-time Pro Bowl honoree, Malcolm Jenkins. He's the National Football League Players Association Executive Committee board member, entrepreneur, executive director, published author, CNN contributor, philanthropist, and an advocate for social change. A businessman, Jenkins created Malcolm Inc., a holding company for the various businesses verticals he co-founded, including Listen Up Media, a multimedia production company with the mission to showcase and distribute content that creates social awareness around systemic issues in our society. Broad Street Ventures, a $10 million investment vehicle funded entirely by Black and Brown investors, including a group of fellow NFL players. Disrupt Foods, a multi-unit franchise developer that operates 20+ quick service restaurants aiming to level the economic playing field for Blacks and Hispanics through franchise ownership. And Damari Clothing, a custom clothing company, including ready-to-wear, made-to-measure men's suits. He's also a three-time NFL Walter Payton Man of the Year finalist and 2017 NFLPA Byron Wizard White Award winner. Jenkins strives to make a positive difference in the lives of youth in underserved communities. The Malcolm Jenkins Foundation that he's created is really creating that uplift. He has a BA in strategic communication from The Ohio State University and is a 2020-2021 visiting fellow at the Harvard Weatherhead Initiative on Global History. I would be remiss to also say he's a part of the greatest fraternity in the world, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, which I'm a part of as well. So I welcome today Malcolm Jenkins.
Brother, how you doing?
I'm good, brother. Thank you for joining us and again lending your platform to the social injustices that are taking place out here and also economic equality and franchising. So we thank you and Joe Johnson for being a part of this discussion here today.
Appreciate you having me.
Thank you. So we're gonna get started in our questions and just really want to get your opinion, you and Joe's opinion in regards to, like, throughout your career, you've been a leader on and off the field, demonstrating the courage to have the uncomfortable conversation and tackling social injustices and inequalities disproportionately impacting Black people in America. You have used your platform and brand to speak on these issues of criminal justice system reform, NFL players' rights, youth mentorship, and now economic equality and franchising. How will the athlete franchise partners plan to impact the trajectory of generational wealth for Black people and include more athletes in this process?
Yeah, well, I think, for me, a little bit of background on myself is, I've always been kind of raised around these issues. I went to from kindergarten to about second grade, went to an all Black private school in Newark, New Jersey that was founded by local activists and Black Panther, members of the Black Panther Party in that area. And so I learned a lot about our history, who we are as people. My mom worked in the Supreme Court in New Jersey, so I learned very early about the criminal justice system and how Black and brown people are filtered through there. And so now, as an adult with some station and a platform and people who follow, it was very natural for me to kind of fit into this realm. And what you see me doing is really learning as I go, but implementing a lot of these things in my own life to be the example. And when we talk about how do we create generational wealth, right? There's a difference between being wealthy and rich. And I had to learn that even myself. You don't gain generational wealth off of labor. And so how do we turn into ownership? So even though I'm a professional athlete, I make a lot of money playing ball, I still don't have ownership in things. So when my body's done, if I'm done laboring, what is bringing me in dollars? And so we started to look at, alternative investments and how to make passive income. And what I realized in franchising as we moved into that space is that it is an operation heavy business, right? Everything is operations. It's not like the market or investing in something. I could just put my money there and then turn around and hope that it returns. You have to really have a true operator that can make the business go. And I was blessed enough to have Joe Johnson, who's the COO of Malcolm Inc., all of my verticals, to handle those operating things. And so as I looked at how we've modeled my own business ventures, what I realized is that there's appetites for other guys and other Black and brown people that are even outside of athletes, just entertainers and folks that do have the means to invest in these alternative investments, but don't have the operators, right? And so I've seen guys fall short in doing that. They either try to do it themselves or their operators just aren't qualified enough, and that's literally their business. And so what we want to do with athlete franchise partners is create a vehicle in which guys, my peers or people that we know are Black and brown investors that want to get into franchising can do so without having to, figure out the operations parts on their own, and can truly just invest in the growth of what we're doing. Invest in, quick service restaurants being the focus, as we've seen, those type of restaurants did well over the pandemic when a lot of these restaurants that, have people, the patrons that have to come sit, just had too much space and really struggle. So we focus on that area. How do we educate guys on what franchising is? How do you get involved while mitigating the risk as well by taking over the operations piece of that business?
Thank you, Malcolm. That is amazing, and it kind of leads me to with your advocacy on the franchising end. What can franchise brands, because we have a lot of franchisors on the phone as well, what can franchise brands do from a diversity and inclusion standpoint in their departments? What can they implement to increase minority participation in franchising? Is there something they can do differently to encourage, to engage, or is there programs they can put in place? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think this is something that Joe can talk to a little bit more. I know one of the things that we recognized when we got into the space is that one, there's not that many, of us who are franchise owners. And oftentimes a lot of these stores are filled, the restaurants are filled with workers who look like us, right? And we employ Black and brown people. And so we wanted to figure out how we can change that dynamic, both from the corporate structure, but also how are we engaging with the folks that in the communities that we are in and the folks who are working for us. I know Joe's done some of that stuff on our behalf with Disrupt Foods and some of the companies that we have. So I think he'd be better to really lay out what that plan should look like.
Yeah, I think it's really about being intentional, right? About solving the problem. And you really need a holistic approach to this. And I think it starts from the top down, right? So I think from a brand's perspective, right, I think it starts with diversification at the board level. And I think that then feeds diversification at the executive level. And I think then we can start talking about how do we diversify the franchisee base? When you talk about representation specifically, for Black and brown, Black and Hispanic people in this space, right? When we represent about 18% of the, when it comes to ownership in the franchise space, but we represent over 30% of the population, right? So, how do we truly close the gap for Black and brown ownership in these franchise brands? It'll take all of us, but these brands need to be very intentional about their strategy to increase or close the gap on diversity as it relates to their franchisee base.
Excellent, excellent. And that leads me, and with being more diverse through their boards, through all levels of engagement within the franchise industry, and learning about your inspiration for your organization, how will you encourage Black entrepreneurs to use the vehicle of franchising to build up their business empire? How will you create that vehicle through athlete franchise partners?
Yeah, I think we tried to create vehicles. Like that's what I'm about. Is how do we leave something that doesn't make us have to go the hard way or have guys going out on their own. And this idea of group economics is one that I feel like we don't do enough of when it comes to the Black and brown community, specifically around African Americans. And we've done it historically, but it's for whatever reason been very hard. And when you look at everybody who's making money, they're doing it together, right? And so we want to create those vehicles in which, like I said, you can be a franchise owner without having to have the burden of the operation of the actual restaurants, and come in and treat those just like any other investments. And for us, scale was something that was also, an issue where you come in and most franchises, if this is your first time, you're new in the space, they'll give you one store, right? And then maybe another after that if you prove yourself, and that's not creating generational wealth. We want to be able to scale quickly. So that comes with being able to pool our capital, but also having, a reputation of being a quality operator, which we've been able to do. And we've reached out to people who we've seen do it well. Junior Bridgman, did it probably better than anybody. People really don't know who he is, but if you look at athletes with the highest net worth, I think there's Michael Jordan and then there's him. And he did it off the court through franchising. So there was people like him that we talked to, his family that just bought Jet and Ebony magazine that just give us some guidance and also give us, they verify us in this space when we're talking about trying to scale. And so those things, like I said, we're just creating the vehicle for people who look like us, who don't necessarily have all the exposure, who want the opportunities, but don't have, again, the operators to do such, that still can get into this space in a way that's actually impactful and meaningful.
If I can just expand on that a little bit, and to Malcolm's point, right? The goal is really, the goal for us through athlete franchise partners and other initiatives that we're a part of and we're rolling out is to increase ownership, right, in these franchise brands. And specifically as it relates to athlete franchise partners, we saw a unique opportunity to just better maximize ownership opportunities for athletes in the space. I think athletes have been long courted by these franchise brands to do marketing deals and different endorsement relationships, and we understand how influential athletes and entertainers are in our culture and community. But we want to leverage this in a unique way to really shout about equity and ownership, right? And so, you know, that's what this initiative and these initiatives are all about. You know, I think to Malcolm's point, right, we were very inspired very early on by the works of Magic Johnson, Junior Bridgman, the success that they've had. And, you know, I think athletes have a powerful platform, you know, and we want to capitalize on that. I think we even you know, really came and looked at this franchising asset class, you know, more intensely because we saw people that looked like us in this space, right? So that see it, be it, thought there is what we're after. And I think it can have a very powerful impact on our culture and help to attract more Black and brown folks to the state.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Malcolm. I think the information you're providing here today, I know it's been inspiring to me, and just to hear the utilization of your platform in this industry. And I think one of my last questions that I want to put out there, you're Malcolm, you're in the top 10% of how you give back, how you give of yourself, how you you give up service of yourself, and you're a servant leader. You do it responsibly, and I know you're always a voice. So I ask you the final question: what role should Black leaders in the franchise space play in helping to move equality forward?
I mean, I think it's anybody who has their foot in the door, right? Especially when we talk about Black and brown people, we're in a community and we're talking amongst ourselves. Anybody who's at the table, who's access, or who has a door open, has a responsibility to prop it open for somebody else. So there's always, you know, talk about what we can do on a ground level. You got the activists, you have the organizers, and the things that people can do as a community. But for those of us who have climbed that ladder, who do have access, who have some agency and some authority, have a responsibility to make sure that we change the cultures at the top of these organizations, making sure that we remove the hurdles that we had to climb over to get to where we are. And I think that just allows for those behind us to better navigate, you know, to us. And when there's more of us at the table, there's more power for us collectively. When there's more, we talk about generational wealth. The reason it's so important is because the more of us who have generational wealth, the more of us have power and independence, the ability to change policy, the ability to own, you know, the destiny of our families, our neighborhoods, our communities. All of that comes with ownership, and that takes efforts from the ground level, but also those of us who are privileged enough to be in these spaces with the knowledge that we have to keep that door propped open.
Well, Malcolm, I thank you for taking the time out to join us in the midst of your busy schedule. I know you've been doing a lot of promoting on this and getting ready for the season. And wish you a successful season, a healthy season. Anything we could do from the International Franchise Association to support in your mission, we are here for you. Just know that we are extending that hand of friendship to you. So I thank you for this fireside chat. And I'm pretty sure that we'll be connecting more often. And Joe, you stay right there because we're going to need you for the upcoming panel as well, because you have more a wealth of information to continue to share with us. So, and moving on in our program, I would like to introduce the Black Franchise Leadership Council Education Committee, led by Dr. Cassandra G. Hill. She's head of the Education Committee, and she's also executive director at Choice Hotels Owners Council. So Dr. Cassandra G. Hill, I hand the floor over to you.
Thank you, Richard. Members engage associations for knowledge and support, and the goal of this education committee is to provide them with both of those. Our purpose is to educate our members in the areas that provide them the greatest opportunities for their development and advancement, and assist them with capitalizing on the strengths they already bring to the table. The objective of the Education Committee is to identify where and how we grow from here. How do we take the lessons that have been learned and initiate proactive changes that are beneficial to everyone while still being unique to the group or groups that need the change? It can be extremely difficult and uncomfortable to speak in the moment. Many of us are afraid of how we will sound, but more of us are concerned with what others will think. But remaining silent is allowing the current status quo to remain. Not lending your voice to the conversation is not fulfilling your commitment in the role of a parent, an employer, an employee, a friend, or in our case, mentors of the Education Committee. Nelson Mandela said, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." So we invite all the change agents to become a part of the Education and Learning Committee so that we can assist in bridging the gap and equipping everyone with the knowledge needed to successfully achieve their goals. And that is what we do. So anyone interested, please let me know. Thanks, Richard.
Welcome, Dr. Cassandra Hill. We definitely appreciate you. Look forward to the wonderful things that your committee are going to do this upcoming year, and glad to have you as a part of the team. And if you're interested, please shoot information in the chat, email us. We'll give you information before or after the event is over on how to connect with us. Next up, we have a great panel discussion. The moderator for that panel discussion is Nancy Williams. She is president and CFC Invaluable Franchise Consultant, franchise and Black Enterprise Magazine content contributor. So I now turn this part of the program over to Nancy Williams, who will be your moderator for today's panel discussion.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, the audience, for joining us. And I'm excited to moderate our esteemed panel. So let me start with doing introductions. We have Joe Johnson. Joe is the Chief Operating Officer at Malcolm Inc., where he manages strategic investments, partnerships, and operations across the company's portfolio. He also serves as the president of the Disrupt Franchise Company, a purpose-driven franchise investment and development company. He has over 12 years of multi-unit retail operations and business development experience, including tenures at Target Corporation and Cisco Systems. He serves on various boards and councils, including the Papa John's Foundation, FP Youth Outcry, and the PJI Franchise Advisory Council. New Jersey, he's a New Jersey native and a Rutgers University alum. So welcome, Joseph. Second, we have Dr. Cassandra Hill. Brings us 20 plus years of experience in hospitality. And she's a recipient of the Choice Hotels prestigious Sleep In of the Year Award. She chairs the BFLC Education Committee and is a member of the IFA Diversity Institute Board and Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Dr. Hill holds an MBA and MS in leadership, along with a doctorate in organizational development and design. And then finally, we have Damon Dunn. Damon is a successful real estate developer, investor, and businessman, former collegiate and pro football player, and was a Hoover Institute Fellow from 2011 to 2013. Damon is a board member of the International Franchise Association, and he is the founder and managing member of Linguita Industries, LLC, a private equity-backed franchise fund with holdings that include 23 Dunkin' stores in Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Alabama. Damon holds a BA degree in public policy from Stanford University. Thank you to all our esteemed panel. So we're going to jump right in, and our theme of this event is equity in franchising. So let's just kick this off with Joe. Would love to hear your thoughts on what does equity in franchising look like for you?
Yeah, I think it's, equitable distribution of ownership, right, across the industry. I think, I kind of pivot back to the statistic of, 8% of franchise brands being owned by, Black and, Black folks. And, while we represent 14% of the population, right? And even at 8%, right, when you talk about top tier concepts, that number is even lower, right? So I think, it's going to take, the word that just continues to come to mind is just intentionality of, industry players, brands, right? Folks that are in the space and have access to help usher in more Black and Hispanic, people into the space. I mean, so for me, what it looks like is very clear, diversity at all levels, of this industry. And I think then we'll start to see, a closing of this gap that exists.
Great. Well, thank you. Couldn't agree more. I think there's a lot of things we need to work on in all levels of franchising that will help us achieve that equality and drive that number up. It's way too low. And I look forward to working with this organization to help do that. Our next question I'd like to pose to Damon. So there was a recent article published in CNN. It was entitled "Black-Owned Banks Are Booming and They're Pouring Money Back into Their Communities." We all love to hear that, and it's great news. How do you see this directly impacting franchise ownership for African Americans?
I think there's an opportunity for it to impact Black-owned Black franchisees. I'm not certain of how much it will. Banks have priorities on how they lend money, and every bank is different. And so based on their board direction, are they going to be investing in mostly residential? Are they going to be investing in different type of commercial loans? Are they going to be doing business lines of credit? A lot of banks, some banks, I know at Dunkin', in my relationship with Dunkin', they specialize in doing Dunkin' deals, and Dunkin' has relationship with banks so that they can have access to projected sales volume based on historical data that they've been able to accumulate. And so I think there is an opportunity. I think it would be a group like IFA if they could have an opportunity to meet with these banks in a forum that was set up to talk about the importance of franchising and then being able to bring some of that infrastructure that other banks that do specialize in lending to franchisees. I think that would give them an opportunity to look for those opportunities, but it would take a group like IFA or a large franchisor like Dunkin' to conglomerate those banks that are actively lending out funds to create a initiative to help Black-owned businesses and Black-owned franchisees. But without that, I think it'll be sporadic. It'll be Black entrepreneurs that'll reach out to these banks without any understanding whether or not they specialize and focus in franchisees, and with the bank not really having any education or infrastructure to be able to do so. So as it sits today, they're lending money based upon the priorities that were founded by their boards. And I wouldn't know if they're going to be successful in lending to Black businesses, particularly in the franchise space, because those initiatives are internal at this point.
So let's dig a little bit deeper on that. You know, as a certified franchise consultant, I definitely understand the lending piece and consulting my clients about where to go to get funds. And just like you stated, I certainly recommend that they start with the franchisors resources, because as you said, they do specific deals all the time. They know what it takes to get through. So when we talk about these Black banks, is there, obviously the IFA, you know, would be a good influence on that, but what should the conversation be with individual franchisors about the importance of partnering and having an internal SBA or lender person that works in those Black banks in order to be able to prioritize the funds that can go to folks that are starting to, you know, wanting to start a franchise?
Yes, I think part of it is missional and part of it is transactional. The missional piece, I think what Malcolm and what Joe talked about is having board members that make this a priority. Right now, if you're on the board of Dunkin' Donuts and you guys, we were acquired by Inspire Brands, the initiatives are going to be, you know, I don't want to say they overpaid, but they paid a significant price above what we would have thought market pricing was. So their focus is going to be, how do we drive more revenue from our franchisees? How do we open up more stores? How do we get in more quality franchisees, people who have backgrounds and track records and the capabilities to execute? And so I don't think that the initiative on the board level there is going to say, we want to bring in more Black-owned franchisees. If you happen to be one of the top franchisees and you happen to be Black, then you will probably get opportunities. But if without board level direction to say we want to engage in these communities, then I don't think it's going to happen. So that's the missional piece. There has to be some mission driven from the board level to do so. That can be activated by guys like Charlie Chase, who work with the IFA and then could have those bilateral conversations with the CEO, David Hoffman, or with Scott Murphy, who's the president of the company, to be able to drive that, and maybe a board member. So that's the missional piece. And then there's a transactional piece. And the transactional piece is, here's Dunkin' sales, here are our franchisees. We understand the unit economics in these markets. Based upon that, the average net operating income is 20%. If they're $1 million, they're doing $200,000 of free cash flow. And based upon that, they can pay your debt service at 5 to 6%. So these are very safe loans. These are very profitable loans. And when we have infrastructure within the franchisor that will support, these Black-owned businesses, these Black franchisees, we can show you that you're going to make a lot of money doing this. But it takes both of those pieces, the missional piece coming from the top, maybe inspired by groups like IFA or a board member that happens to care about that, and not just and only prioritizing the profitability based on the recoup of this acquisition, but then also that transactional piece of saying, hey, look, these are good loans. Everyone who's in Dunkin' that's borrowing money on these equipment, the sales are showing up. Why? Because Dunkin' builds the business. We pay 10.9% in royalties for them to do TV commercial ads, to do mailers, to do cable. We are driving revenue, so you will have your debt service covered. They're safe and profitable.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, because while we all want to make progress, we understand this is business, right? So
Right.
it's got to be a win-win for everyone. And that's, I think we have to emphasize that, Black business owners, Black businesses, franchises make money for
Right.
everybody. They build communities, and they are safe bets for these businesses, or for these lenders that, are out there giving money for business support. So thank you for that. Dr. Hill, what can be done to empower more women, specifically African-American women, to become business owners, and what financial assistance is available to them?
Nancy, education, mentoring, and encouragement are what we can do to empower more women, and especially African-American women. Empowerment can be provided in multiple ways, including accepting the viewpoints of women and making an effort to seek us out for vital positions of authority and raising the equality of women in leadership. That is when the open exchange of ideas leads to growth, and support provides strength, allowing us to reach heights we never would have accomplished. We also have to showcase successful African-American women franchisees and leaders, which shows other women that we can all own a franchise. We can all have a seat in the C-suite, regardless of our color and our gender. And we can showcase the unique skills that only African-American women bring to the table. By doing all of this together, we unite and provide knowledge, support, and a strength to each other, and we become unstoppable.
That's such a great answer, Dr. Hill. So, part of what I do is work very closely with African-American women that want to own a franchise, but they have no idea of where to start. And education is critical. But as you said, the support piece in encouraging them to take the chance and understanding what that risk looks like is extremely important. Women, tend to not feel they can measure up. They're, we're sort of put in this box that there's certain things that we should be doing or we're good at, and we're just afraid to break out of that box. So, I tell my clients all the time that I talk to franchisors and some of the top performers in non-traditional, women franchises, restoration for one of them, commercial cleaning, that's just not, what a woman's going to thrive in. And that is so far from the truth, because so many franchises are fundamentally about customer service and taking care of customers. And we know that Black women do a lot of caretaking, in the home, out of the home, everywhere. So it's just a matter of that mentorship, that partnership. And, I consider myself an ambassador into franchising, because my job is to help, candidates feel comfortable going through the process, understanding that they can't afford it, how to do that in a way that won't leave them, not being able to pay their bills. But just, again, understanding the power of African-American women in society, in business, and in education at all levels. So I really appreciate that response. So our next question is going to go to all of our panelists. The question is, other than financial qualifications, what other barriers do you feel exist in franchising that prevent more Black ownership? So Damon, can you start with that one?
Yeah, and I think Dr. Busby, he summed it up, but let me give this in a historical context. 1865, we're free. We have no education, we own no money, we own no land, we own no businesses, we have no insurance policies, we have no inheritance to receive, we can't read, we can't write, and we're free. And now you fast forward today, we've had our first president, we've got a few billionaires, we've got a lot of entertainers and athletes. We have some people like Robert Smith who've matriculated through, the finance world. But on the most part, we still lack the exposure to where you can build wealth and own businesses. And I say that because I grew up really poor. My mom had me at 16. My father was killed when I was 3. Nobody told me that there was an opportunity to franchise, what that looked like, who the franchises were, how do I underwrite, how do I get banks to lend. Just lack of exposure, just bad information, being in a low socioeconomic, community environment and not having mentors or people to help me. It was when I got to Stanford, when my mind was blown by the total world that was out there of opportunities to be able to build wealth, to be able to own businesses, to be able to take jobs in different careers and get high wages if I wanted to be a laborer. And so to me, that's the biggest barrier. We don't have in our community enough people like myself, enough people like Joe and Malcolm, enough people like all of the panelists that are here that are in our communities to even expose us to these opportunities. So we live without having any access of knowing what's possible. And yet I think that a lot of our white counterparts grow up in communities, at least when I was at Stanford, grow up in communities where they have access to this information and it impacts their expectations. And then they end up doing and achieving great things. And I'll finish by saying this. When I look back at my peers that didn't make it out of my community, like I've been able to, thank God for that. It wasn't that they had no expectations. It's that they had low expectations and met them. And that's what's happening. It's the bigotry of low expectations. It's sitting in these communities without having people like myself and Joe in every community to go back and talk to people and help them understand the access to opportunity. And so to me, that's the barrier. Go to any Black community and most of these young people are not going to understand how they can build wealth, how they can own a home, how they can pay for their kids to go to college, how they can build an inheritance, all those things. So it's lack of exposure.
Thanks, Damon. That was great. Joe, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, no, certainly. I couldn't agree more. I think there's a very real information and awareness gap. Although, the IFA, Black, Franchise Leadership Council, you guys have done tremendous work, trying to educate, we still need awareness about this asset class and the benefits from a wealth creation standpoint, right? So I think even for us, right, that's why we've been very intentional about leveraging the athlete platforms that we have, right, and that social capital to try to draw attention, right, to the industry, and then we can, continue that education process. I would say additionally, there's a, and to Damon's point, there's a relationship gap, right, for us in the space. We just don't have those traditional relationships that will allow us to, access some of the different resources that we would need to be successful or to get started in the space. And I would say also, training, right? I think, really creating pipeline programs that feed ownership, right? Franchising is an operations game for the most part. And, years ago, a lot of these brands used to have programs that fed, ownership for Black and brown people, and those programs don't exist today. So I think the financial hurdle is definitely there, but I think those are some other barriers that prevent us from having the success in the space that we truly can, right? Because we over-index when it comes to the workforce, right, in these spaces. So we run these brands, we're represented, right, on the day-to-day operations, right, in terms of being the face of the brand from a customer facing perspective. But again, we're just very underrepresented at the ownership level, and these are some of the reasons why.
Great. And Dr. Hill, your thoughts?
Nancy, I think that fear is one of the barriers to our success. I think that fear is on everyone's everyone is afraid. We're afraid to take the risk, we're afraid to take the opportunities, and our counterparts of other ethnicities are afraid to give us the opportunity to have it and achieve it. So I think that as a group, we need to holistically decide that everyone can be successful, that there is an opportunity for everyone to be exactly what they want to be, and that my having that opportunity, or you're having that opportunity, or Joe having that opportunity does not negate that someone else can't do it too. And I think that when that's recognized and we stop being afraid to allow everyone to be successful, that will open more opportunities for us.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that goes back to what Damon was saying. So I think all of us have seen or experienced this, that, you know, where our fear levels here, you know, there's a lot of other people that's here. And when you cut that in half, you can certainly take the leap a lot easier when you feel you have a safety net. You know, if you fail, you know, someone's going to be there to pick you up or reinvest in you, or you have access to capital that, you know, a lot of us don't have. And breaking down that fear is critical. And I think this question is important because, you know, usually the first thing people think of is, I can't afford to buy a franchise. So we know that the financial piece is there. But even once you get them, you know, we get the capital for you, we secure the capital for you. There's so many other things that are going on that may, you know, disable you from actually moving forward. So while we do need to focus on funding and financing and capital, access to capital, there are many other categories that will, you know, stop you if we don't address those at the same time. So appreciate those thoughtful responses. Damon, the next question's for you. What role should Black leaders in the franchise space play in helping more equality moving forward?
Yeah, and I've known this question for a few days, and I've been really thinking about it. It's tough because you know, it's not easy for me to go talk to David Hoffman and say we need to create an initiative, who's the CEO of Dunkin', create an initiative to bring more Black owners in when their focus right now is on being able to expand the brand to many more states that they're not in, and grow their wealth. And we need, I think, where we can make a difference is groups like us, all of us on this forum right now, going to guys like Charlie Chase and saying, hey, look, we need the IFA to lobby within some of these larger franchisors to create an initiative to want to bring in Black franchisees. And then the group of us that are here, we take on the work role, right? Because they can create the initiative, but they don't have someone to lead it. So I think we could create the leverage to be able to have people like an IFA to reach out to franchisors. And then with the franchisors, we could say, this is what we could meaningfully do. And we would obviously have to have several work meetings to figure out what can we really achieve. You know, we may not be able to attract the afraid people right now, because that's a bigger barrier and kind of a mental health thing that's very difficult for us to deal with. But there are a lot of Blacks that have the opportunity, that want to do it, that are eager and ready, just don't have the access to the capital, don't understand how to get engaged. And so can we get those highly capable, highly likely, highly desirous people engaged? And what could we do as a work group to say, okay, we will do the vetting, we will work with them, we'll come up with some type of education forum for them to understand how franchising works. We would be willing to do that, but we do need the organization as a whole and the leadership of the organization to reach out to the franchisor. So to me, that would be the most powerful thing we could do, is to get organizations like IFA to lobby these larger franchisors, because they're not going to take our phone calls, but they'll take Charlie Chase's phone call and say, hey, look, we really want to encourage you guys to start building within your umbrella opportunities for Black-owned franchisees. And we as a group within the IFA will do the work on onboarding them, educating them, vetting them, giving them access to lending, helping them build P&Ls, understanding how you underwrite these deals. Like, we could do all that, but we do need the organization and the credibility and the leadership to go in and advocate for opportunities for Black franchisees.
Yeah, exactly. And I know the question was really focused on Black leadership, but I just want to point out that we all play a role. Yeah. It's one of the reasons that I engaged very early on with Black Enterprise Magazine, you know, just when I was getting into franchise consulting, because as Dr. Hill mentioned, it's also about telling stories, right? It's telling stories about people that are being successful, running, owning franchises, how they got there, how they overcame the obstacles in their way. And, you know, I certainly was no leader at that point. It just really had started, but I knew the importance of storytelling and letting people see themselves in these stories. And that also can facilitate, you know, the increase in ownership for sure. So thank you. Dr. Hill, what is the most effective way for relatively new franchisees to tap into business resources available due to the current environment around racial and gender inequalities?
Based on the current environment around racial and gender equalities, the word I would use is quickly, because we have to ask ourselves, is this a movement or a moment? And if the environment and the opportunities will be the same 3 to 5 years from now. We can't count on an unfortunate, another George Floyd incident to catapult diversity and inclusion to the forefront of organizations and lending institutions. We have to take those opportunities now. Speaking from the perspective of an educator, knowledge acquisition trumps everything, and is the first necessary tool, I believe, for everything. There are opportunities and advantages being offered to minorities right now by franchisors with free training workshops and detailed step-by-step information of their organization and how to become one of their franchisees. That has not always been the case for us. Right now, there is emphasis that is finally being placed on the success of African-American franchisees. And now is the time that we must take the advantage and capitalize on the unprecedented support that organizations are providing for us. And I want to thank Damon for that plug for the Education Committee that he just did. So Damon, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just want to stay on that topic for a little bit, Dr. Hill. So yeah, I tell my clients, my friends, anyone I see on the street that's a Black business owner, the second that you hear about a grant coming up, you need to apply that same day. Of course, again, we talk about barriers. Unfortunately, a lot of us don't have our books together and things that you need to apply. But the second that you hear something is available, whether you think you qualify or not, just go ahead and apply, and you'll find out, if you do or don't. So you may get some funding that you never even thought you would have access to. But I agree, you need to do it quickly. You need to be on top of that. You need to be monitoring what's available out there, and certainly go for it. And this next question is one I get a lot, so I wanted to hear, anyone can weigh in on this. But once franchise owners get the capital they need, what is your advice on how to spend it? So we get a lot of people that spend it on marketing or spend it on operations. Is there any, not that there's a right or wrong way, but how would you encourage someone to spend those funds early on, and then or for long term? Damon, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, ultimately, I go back to, Joe and Malcolm have done a great job articulating that QSR and franchisee business is all about operations. If you don't understand operations, if you're not spending your dollars to educate yourself on operations, you're never going to be able to open up more stores. You may get one opportunity, but if you don't know how to operate, the brand is not going to extend you more opportunities, because you ruin the reputation of the brand in the market. And so you could do marketing and you could spend money on a lot of different things, but if you don't understand how to run good operations, if you don't have good people in the restaurant, and how would you spend it? I'll give you more content there as opposed to leaving that generic. You have to understand how to build a blueprint. I talked to probably 20 different Dunkin' franchisees before we even decided to get into the business, and before my equity partners backed me. I needed to know, what does a P&L look like? What are all the line items on your P&L? I started to realize really quickly that food and labor were the most important and most variable items on my P&L that I needed to be able to run. Everything else, occupancy costs, what your payroll tax are going to be, what your minimum wage rate, all that stuff is kind of plugged in, and you can manage that stuff. But food and labor matter a lot if you're going to be actually successful and if you're going to be profitable. And so you need people that know how to manage food and how to manage labor, and then you need customer service. So I would spend money building a blueprint to be able to understand great operations, because operations beget more opportunities for more operations. And if you don't get that right, they're not going to extend you any more opportunities. You'll have that one store, they may even take it away from you. But you're certainly not going to get a second or 23 stores if you're not a really good operator. So to me, the wisest thing you could spend that money on is building great operations, whether that's hiring someone that from a company that you got to pay a lot more money to, or whether that's, traveling around the country to meet with franchisees to understand, how they're doing it right, and collecting and building a blueprint of what that looks like. but finding ways to spin that to understand how to be a great operator and getting great operating teams in there, great shift leaders, great general managers. You may have to overpay for it, but it's worth it because that can lead to millions of dollars of opportunity. We're doing about $6.2 million of free cash flow now out of the 23 stores that we're operating. And we started with 4 and I closed 1. We were at 3 and we were losing money. We were paying more for overhead than what the revenues that we had coming in because they paid me a lot. They overpaid me to be the operator, which was a good choice by them, obviously. And so over time, we started to build our operations and now my partners are making 6.2 million, 67% free cash flow yield on the money that's behind me. And so that has allowed me to go into 5 different or 6 states now and have SDAs where we can build 100 units. But that never would have happened if I was a failure at operations.
Great story. Joe, anything to add there?
Yeah, just Damon, great point. I think, sound capital allocation, having a sound capital allocation strategy is very important, right? Especially in franchising where you're always fighting for margin. Really developing clear plans. I mean, I come across franchisees all the time who just truly don't know their numbers, right? And I think it starts with creating, just sound strategy and plans around how you're going to leverage your resources from a capital perspective. But I think the greatest investment, right, when there's additional capital out there, and then Damon kind of touched on this, is the investment in people and talent, right? Because to scale your organization, right, it really you're gonna need great people, right? So that would be my advice, right? Because the more that you put back in a restaurant, it really enables you to grow your business, and for you to spend more time not working in your business but on your business.
Great. And Dr. Hill, I'd love to hear your perspective from a hospitality, hotel, what you would advise in terms of how to spend those dollars.
I agree with both Damon and Joe. It's in hiring the right people. And if you have to pay a little bit more for the right person to be your sales director, the right person to be your director of operations, then you need to invest in that. I would also add that training right from the beginning is very, very necessary. And sometimes people feel that training is not an expense that they want to incur. They can get it when we open and they can do, the on-the-job training. That's not always the key to success. Your individual staff members need to know what your expectations are from them, and they need to know how to accomplish those goals. They need to know what to do. I mean, simplistic from the Hospitality Association, when the power goes out, if you have a desk clerk that doesn't know how to rent a room to people without having that computer system up and running, then you have a problem, because next door, they've trained their staff in knowing how to rent that room when the power is out, how to keep people from double renting rooms and going into the same room. We in hospitality sometimes think that the warm body is better than nobody, but that's not the case either. You have to develop your staff. You have to help them see that there is a lot of opportunity for them to be knowledgeable. There's a lot of opportunity for them to know how to talk to the guest and how to make the guests feel special in their hotel at that moment. And that's all done with proper training. And it has to be at the beginning, it needs to be during the process, there needs to be evaluations, and there needs to be, when training changes, people change, and we need to make sure that in the hospitality business that we are ready for that, and that you have another person in the wings that has been trained to step up and take a role when it's open. I was in a hotel a couple days ago in Washington, and there was a young lady there, and she said, well, I'm not sure how to do this because I don't work at this hotel. I'm from another hotel, but because they don't have help here I am. And I thought, I would have never known that if you didn't volunteer that negative information and had just checked me in through the regular process that you do someplace else. So cross-training is important in our industry. And then allowing your team to be comfortable enough in themselves to offer the guest whatever the resolution is without it being so I have to go check with this person, or I have to go check with that person, turns your guest off, right? If you have a situation that you need to handle right then, your team needs to be confident in themselves that you've trained them enough to handle that situation. And you need to be comfortable enough as the owner that you have trained them successfully. So I would say train, and more training.
Hey, Nancy, can I segue on that? Because I think this is—
You can, and I'm going to stay on this. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, so I'm going to go off script a little bit. But yes, I'd like to stay on this topic. So Damon, please go ahead, and then I have a follow-up.
Cassandra, brilliant point you just made, because this, and I'm going to give a very specific example. So when I bought my first 5 stores, because we bought them before we started building them so we could learn the business, I looked at all of our GMs. They had different labor schedules for the same amount of sales at different stores. And I didn't understand that. I'm like, why are we doing $1,000 an hour here and you've got 4 people and this group over here has 9 people? And I didn't understand why they didn't have their labor allocated to some type of basis where everyone would have the same schedules. And so I learned really quickly that it was based on the training. The people who were well trained could execute making a hot coffee or an iced coffee or a breakfast sandwich. They could do these things by knowledge and from memory, and they could move faster. They could look at a screen and see 3 drinks and go away and go make 3 drinks. And then the people who were slower, who had to look at the screen and look at the job aid to figure out how to make a drink, and then look at the screen and look at the job aid how to make a drink, those people actually couldn't move as fast. And so they had more labor for that hour. And so I decided we have to invest in training. So we bought laptops and tablets for all of my stores. In addition to that, everyone that's hired goes 100% through Duncan University online training, and we make them do it in our store, in our lobby, and we pay them. And then and they'll spend 3 hours on the Duncan University, whatever that section is that they're learning. And then we actually put them right on the line. If you're studying making drinks, you're going to make drinks right after that. Spend your time in the Duncan University online in the lobby. We pay you for that. Then you go right to where you're going to train from. And then I decided to standardize all of our labor. We decided to do it based on transactions, per hour, because transactions is not related to sales or numbers, because different items have different sales volumes, but it's transactions by man hour. So now every one of my stores, they all have the exact same transaction by man hour. We do about 11 transactions per man hour. And not only that, I create all the schedules. So I work with my CFO and my director of operations, and the GMs, they don't get to select their schedules. We send them a schedule that says bring 5 people in here, send 2 people home there, bring 1 person in here, and they get a standardized schedule, and they can't change it without the permission of our senior director of operations. So all of my stores are standardized for labor now, and it all came down to training. And the second point you made, Cassandra, which is brilliant, is there's a lot of turnover in this business. So you have to have a bench. And so we've decided now that we have assistant managers at all of our stores. That costs me more because we pay them salary versus paying them dollars per hour. But guess what? When we turn over GMs or we turn over shift leaders, we have somebody that can step right in and do the job really well. So investing in training has saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars in waste and loss and speed of service, customer satisfaction, guest service satisfaction, or guest service satisfaction surveys. And then having a bench that's ready has really allowed us to grow our business to where it's grown now, and we can really deal with turnover really well. We don't mind turnover. We decided we're going to embrace turnover and just be excellent at it and not be afraid of it. We're going to build our bench and we're going to be the best at it. And that's what we've decided to do. So thank you for teeing me up on that, Cassandra.
Well, you've teed me up on my follow-up for sure, because we are obviously all reading the headlines and experience. Some of us that own locations are experiencing the worker shortage, as they call that. So succession planning is critical for sure. But a lot of the folks in these roles are people of color. So outside of paying more, what are some other ideas that you guys have or have implemented that can decrease that turnover? If that's the route you're taking, especially for people of color, what are folks looking for other than just more pay?
Yeah, I'll start here. I think one of the additionally, or underfunded areas of the business is usually around culture. We prioritize investment in culture, right? Happy and engaged teams produce better results, and they stay, right? So where many organizations are focused on trying to grab the next person we're focused on keeping the people that we have and keeping them happy, so that they don't leave us. And to Damon's earlier point too, right? And that creates a more productive team member, right? Because turnover is extremely costly. Right? It's extremely costly, right? You got to train this new person. There's mistakes. There's a learning curve along the way. So just, we really double down on our investment in culture. Whether it's, we do weekly, Fun Fridays, right? And we're very intentional about our recognition program with our team, right? It's authentic, it's real, it's not just some, it's not a nice to have, right? So I would say, really just focused on culture in the restaurants, right? Making sure our teams are happy, they're engaged, and that, we show our appreciation for the work that they're doing and that they mean a lot to our organization.
Great. Dr. Hill, anything to add there on what you guys do?
Opportunities for advancement is one of the key things that we do. And letting your housekeeper know that maybe I'm starting today as a housekeeper, but in X amount of time, I too can be an owner of a franchise. And that motivates them to stay with you. That motivates them to learn and to grow and to want to grow. It's one thing when you just shove somebody in there versus they have the desire to do it. And we have one of our franchisees that he has implemented a program with his staff that on the road to ownership is basically what he would call it. And they start in X position and he trains them for the next position and the next position. He involves them in the decision-making processes. They're allowed to see the budget and to understand why this number is the budget. So as Damon was saying, you would explain to your operations manager at that property that we're not trying to stifle you into having the right amount of people here, but you can do it with this number of people at this particular time of day and be successful at it and have the proper coverage. And that's a growth opportunity. If we continue to, as you said, it's really the people that are at the bottom ranks are typically people of color. I think when they are encouraged and they know that, yes, I can become an owner as well, that they grow with you and that they are the ambassadors of what success looks like at this level, the next level, and the final level of being an owner.
Absolutely. I have had the pleasure of interviewing some incredible Black franchise owners that are putting in place exactly, or have been doing exactly the programs that you're talking about. So they will create a financial, financial informational course where they put everyone through that. Then they go so far as to do profit sharing and then have that sharing go into a fund that they can then buy their own or invest in their own. And I really think that that is something that a lot of us need to build on, because as you said, when you grow up in that environment and are exposed to that, you want more and you want it for yourself, you want it for your family and your community. So having someone there every step of the way to help you save toward that and, and know how to, seek the funding for it and feeling comfortable because you worked in that environment. The leap isn't so much if I'm doing housekeeping today and then all of a sudden, I want to own a ice cream shop, it just seems tremendous. But if I'm comfortable in the skill set that I have, and then I'm learning more to build on that, it's such a inviting opportunity for people. So as I said, I went off script a little bit, but we are ahead of schedule, but this is our wrap-up question, and it is going to be to each of the panelists. So Joe, let's start with you. I know you guys have imparted a whole bunch of wisdom, but just one more piece before we end the panel. What is one piece of practical advice you would give to someone starting out?
Yeah, good question. I think, remembering this is a business and an investment, I would say, develop a sound strategy and investment thesis for whatever concept, that you want to pursue, and it needs to be rooted in economics. suggest creating, a thesis against, for the industry, the category, as well as whatever particular brand. One of my favorite questions to ask folks just, as of networking, just meeting folks is, what drew you to this, right? And, the sophisticated institutional investor can really, talk about the economics of the decision and what decision went into selecting whatever brand. So I think we need to be very intentional about where we're putting our money. Mr. Busby and even Damon alluded to, we don't have that much wealth, right? As Black and brown folks in America, and every dollar, every penny that we have needs to be properly placed in investments that will return capital for us and really aid in that building of generational wealth. I would say the second thing would be, whenever possible, and where it makes sense, leverage group economics, a strategic partnership, really limiting your exposure and your risk, but also that power of the group allows you to scale much faster. There's the African proverb, I love it. It talks about, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think, one of the, key learnings for me very early on in our experience in the space was seeing how collaborative other non-Black and Hispanic groups are in the space, right? People take down deals together, they collaborate, very much in the space. And, we really need to do more of that to allow us to really achieve, the equity and ownership levels that we want to achieve in the space.
Great, thanks. Damon?
I think there's 3 points: underwriting, underwriting, and underwriting. Everybody that you talk to will have some version of underwriting that you need to communicate with. You have to know your P&L. If you don't know your P&L, your operating expense by line in detail, how it fluctuates, how it changes, how it is derived, what a good number looks like, what a bad number looks like, you can't have success anywhere. When you go get money from either a debt source at a bank, they're going to make sure that you understand how much revenue you're going to generate, but they want to know what are your operating expenses. And when you go deal with private equity guys, my guys invested $13 million in my company. I've paid back $5 million. There's $8 million in it. We have $4.5 million of cash in our company right now, and they don't want it back because they're getting 67% cash on cash return. So I'm allowed to use that 4.5 million to open new stores, to make acquisitions, and that makes the free cash flow you'll continue to go up because on that 8 million, I'm deriving a lot more net operating income. And so from a debt source or an equity source you needed, when you go sit down to even have your business plan review meeting, is what Duncan calls their meeting before you become a franchisee. They want to understand, do you know how to run this business? Yeah, you got to talk about operations, but do you have the capital? Do you understand how much it's going to cost? How many stores can you really open? What size store development agreement can you really hold on? Can you execute on? That all comes down to capital allocation in what Joe talked about. How much money do you have? How much lending will you be able to get? How will that impact your ability to grow and open up more units? So everyone, everywhere, it matters. And if you don't manage underwriting well, meaning you can't get more debt, you can't get more equity, and the brand won't allow you to have more stores or even allow you to become a franchisee, your opportunity dies on the vine before you ever get to take it off. So to me, the first thing I would do is what I did when we started, which is meet with as many franchises as possible, ask them to show you their P&Ls. And if they would explain every line item to you and you take notes and you do that with 10, 15 different franchisees, and by the time you're done, you will really understand the P&L. You'll know what percentage food costs should be. It should be 26%, not 35%. It should, labor should be 25% of your sales versus, 33%. And if you don't know that, you have no chance to succeed. You have no chance to get access to capital, whether it's debt or equity, and the brand is it may not even allow you to come on and be inside. But if you do become a franchisee, you're definitely not going to be able to expand if you haven't allocated your capital well, because you're losing money and your stores aren't performing well.
Great. And Dr. Hill?
I would say for individual success planning for yourself, that you would first need to forgive yourself for everything that you've done in the past that you attribute to why you're not in a different place than where you are now. I believe that this opens your mind on what you can do in this present moment to move forward and accomplish the dreams that you have for yourself. I would say the next step would be to mentally prepare yourself for the challenges and the obstacles that you're going to encounter, because they are going to come. You are going to have them. And if you're prepared mentally for them, you'll be able to overcome them and not allow you to end in that bucket of defeat. And you just go, well, I can't overcome this. I can't overcome finding the finances. I can't overcome finding people to support me. I can't overcome finding partners. Sure you can. If you can't find them in this place, go and look at another place. Just don't assume you can't get them. You've got to take the lead in developing the way that success will work for you and not accept that you can't achieve the goal. Of course, educate yourself on attaining and achieving that goal. Educate yourself on what the process is. Know what you need to do. As they've said, speak to other people that are in that place that you're trying to go. Be realistic in the steps and the amount of time that it's going to take you. Some people get very, very, very upset, and it's taking me, 3 years to get one hotel open, and the guy next door, he's got 5 and he did it in 5 years. Well, you're not the guy next door. You may have not had the same opportunities as the guy next door, but you can end up with the same outcome as the guy next door. I always say, plan your work and work your plan. And if you consistently do that, and remember that the decisions and the choices that you make become part of the manuscript and play a very, very important role in how that ends, then you will make the best decisions that lead you to success.
That's great. Someone recently told me that there's no such thing as I can't. You should just say, I don't know how.
Exactly.
And that completely flips the script, right? Which is, it's not, I can't do it, I don't know how, so I just need to seek out somebody that can help me solve the issue. So it's not a matter of I can't. I just want to leave with my one piece of practical advice that I give all of my clients. Whatever business you want to go into, try to find someone in your area that owns a business just like that or similar to that, and go and shadow them for some time, because that will tell you whether you want to really do that or you really want to do something else. So if you get the opportunity, whether it's, a quick service or, as I said, commercial cleaning or whatever the case may be, try and, owners are nicer than people think. They don't necessarily see you as competition. And so they're willing to share their knowledge. They were at where you were at one time. And so they're a lot of times very open to you doing that. So if you can, get in there, shadow the person, learn the business, and see if that's really where you want to be. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Richard. I think we have maybe time for some Q&A, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So, yep, we have up until 2 o'clock, but I just want to say, especially with Dr. Cassandra Hill, everybody's received a PhD in franchising today. I think the information provided was amazing. Everybody here is like top of their game in what they provided. I'm here taking notes on what the next initiative will be. We're all chatting in the background on how we push this mission forward. So if you want, before we close, we do have time for at least maybe 2 or 3 questions before we have Ursa Jackson close us out. So if there's any questions in the chat, Hader or Ashley, we can bring those to the forefront and pose them to anybody on the panel.
So Richard, I think the only question that we have currently is a little bit more information about the project that Malcolm and Joe are running. Are you focusing specifically on restaurants, or are you diversifying into other industries as
well? For athlete franchise partners, is that regarding that program?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we focus very specifically on quick service restaurants, and we focus on top 50 quick service restaurants only and exclusively. And I guess it goes back to my earlier point about developing a sound strategy investment thesis. Why, right? Quick service makes up about 30% of all the money that's made in franchising, and within that, the top 50 make 90% of the money that's made in quick service. So I think sometimes it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's about following the money and the dollars, right? And these are bankable assets, so that's where we focus.
Excellent. Also, I want to make a point of something. And
Richard, I have a question I want to ask when you're done.
Cool. Not a problem. Go ahead, ask the question. Go ahead, Dame.
I know Charlie just got on the phone. I saw you take a call, Charlie. Are you still on that call? Because my question is for you.
And I was about to talk to Charlie too, so we're all on the same page.
Okay, it looks like he took a call because I saw him raise his phone up before he took his video off. But I want to ask that question while we're all here because it's an important question. He's a power broker, and he can open up doors immediately that we probably can't open up where we stand in the organizations that we're within. And so what I really want to ask Charlie when he comes back is, will he make a call to Duncan? Because I know David Hoffman, I'm on his, who's the CEO of Duncan, I'm on his national team for franchisees. He picked 35 franchisees to inform him twice a year what's going on, and Scott Murphy. And so if he wanted to reach out to them to create an initiative within Duncan to help onboard more Black franchisees, I would be willing to lead that under the umbrella of IFA with the group of people that we have here. I think it's a real material thing that we can do today. I'm trusted there. We have all the resources with all of us that are here, and we can walk away here from just having good information to maybe with a real opportunity to execute. And I would love to see that happen, but it would take a call from Charlie to make something like that work.
I will tell you, Charlie's going to join in a few moments, but I'm going to tell you while we're on this conversation, this is franchising and the mission in action. An email has been sent from our president and CEO, Matthew Holler, connected me and Charlie already together to speak about the mission that you spoke about on your panel. And we're going to take that conversation, and Charlie's already agreed to sit down and have a conversation. So this is in motion. That's how powerful this is. So if you don't get the chills or the goosebumps for that, then something's wrong with you and you're not on the same page here. And there go Charlie, he's back.
Hey, Charlie. So I don't know if you were on a call, but one of the things I think that we could do from here, like I know David Hoffman and Scott Murphy personally. I've had a meeting with just the C-suite to cover issues that we've had. And because my guys are private equity guys, they own a large company, done 8 funds over $1 billion. And so we got to meet with the C-suite, all of the C guys, just my group. But if you made a call or if you had directed the initiative to Duncan to say, hey, look, we would love for you guys to create an initiative under your banner to onboard more franchisees of color, Black franchisees, I'd be willing under the umbrella of IFA, along with all the people on this panel, to start putting together a work group and what we think can be achieved and take on the responsibility of doing that. If Duncan would be willing from a board level initiative or a CEO or president initiative to seek that out in certain markets, I would love to do that. And I think it's real because I know those guys personally and they trust me, and you have the credibility to get it done. And we can leave here with just a real missional opportunity and not just have an exchange good information.
Agreed. I can make a call, Damon. No worries.
Okay, so Richard, why don't you guys figure out how we need to make that, what needs to be done before that so that we're prepared and when we're making that call and sending that message to go. And I'm always available if you guys want to do, any kind of thought work or brainstorming on what it should look like. But I think that would be a great initiative if we can leave here. We know that we can bring in some quality Black franchisees to Duncan if given the opportunity.
We're going to have that call as soon as we wrap up here. I know Pam Gore is somewhere online here, ringing the bell right now. And no, definitely. So this is supporting, and this is supporting the mission and vision in action, in motion, and more than just discourse, but change. So Charlie, I want to thank you for carving out this time, because you're a busy man, and for you to carve out and be here all the way to the end speaks volumes of your time that you're investing into this initiative. So I really appreciate you. And do you have any additional words you would like to share before you close out?
As I said to the panelists on a chat, the depth of knowledge and the experience of the people who have been sharing information is astounding. And my journey in franchising is not unlike any other person's journey. It feels to me as though I was able to be onboarded more easily. And I think Damon and Cassandra have made a really good point. And Joe put a finer point on it with access to funding. And we in our world call it educate, collaborate, communicate. So the educate piece needs to be better done, well done. But then the collaborate piece, and I'm here to collaborate because there's a lot of money chasing opportunities right now. And in my humble opinion, I think the way Damon and Joe have articulated is where we should go with this. So I'm in. And I think it's broader than Duncan, and it's broader than just QSR. So we got to start somewhere.
Excellent.
So
Well,
thank you.
Charlie, thank you. And I'm gonna wrap up for Ursa. She's having some technical issues, but I just want to say, feel free to reach out to us here at the Black Franchise Leadership Council and also the Diversity Institute Board on any information about any of our programs. Right now, we have the Community Partners Committee, we have the Marketing Committee, we have the Access to Capital and Funding Strategies Committee, and we have the Education Committee. So we have 4 pillars in which you can join us to help move this initiative of engaging more Black entrepreneurs into the world of franchising. So feel free to reach out. You have contact points with me, Ashley, with Ricky, Ursa, Dr. Cassandra Hill, Pam Gore, JD, multiple contact, and Latanya Pouncey. Latanya's not one that's on here, but I want to give her a special kudos because she's an advisor to the council that supports us and putting a lot of this together and moving this engine forward. So again, I thank everybody for their time. I'm about to give you back almost about 9 minutes of your day. Feel free to reach out to anybody here. Celebrate an amazing Juneteenth because it's just not one day, but Juneteenth should be a mindset of continuing to understand where you came from and where you're going. So once again, thank you for joining the Black Franchise Leadership Council. We hope you have an amazing day. And that is all. Be blessed, everybody.
Thanks. Bless.